I think Neymar is better than Messi. Those were the words of footballing legend Pele back in 2011, nearly 2 years before his eventual transfer to Barcelona. The skinny teenager with spiky hair and a nervous smile had already become the face of Brazilian football, constantly pulling out rainbow flicks and making defenders look like clowns with his quick feet. He was flashy, he was unpredictable, and for many, he was a reminder of what the beautiful game could be. But it wasn't all good. Could these skills translate to European football? Was that enough to dethrone Messi? And then there was also drama and tantrums, like the time Neymar was taken off penalties for missing too many, causing him to swear at the coach. What the lad has done is unacceptable. Someone has to educate this kid or we will create a monster. That was what manager Real Jr had to say about the situation. The coach subsequently dropped Neymar and called for a 15-day suspension, which would see him miss the game against Santos' biggest rivals, Corinthians. Thus, the manager was sacked just hours later. Fast forward a few years to 2013, and Barcelona would drop a whopping 86.2 million euros on Neymar, a fee that would later spark controversy, investigations, and court cases. All because a fan conducted their own investigation. And so, why? Why did one of the biggest clubs in the world gamble their reputation, their finances, and their integrity on a skinny teenager that was close to becoming a monster? What made them decide that Neymar was the future of the club? Well, to find that answer, we have to rewind the clock. Back before the transfer wars, before the sponsorships, before the court cases. Back to a tiny house in Brazil, a place where Neymar's father would work 3 jobs just to keep the family afloat. A family who would all sleep on one mattress, where futsal courts, sandy streets, and a single tiny room at home with his cousins as goalposts became Neymar's training ground. This isn't just the story of a transfer, it's the story of a kid who started with nothing yet was destined for global superstardom, forcing some of Europe's biggest clubs into a bidding war that changed football forever. And that story starts right now. You see, Neymar's parents couldn't even afford an ultrasound. They found out he was a boy the moment he was born. No medical planning, no gender reveal party, just raw, uncertain life. As his dad would later say, we weren't starting from 0, we were starting from -5. Now, his father, Neymar Sr, had himself once dreamed of being a football star. He was a semi-pro striker, but his career never really took off. And so when it fizzled out, he packed up his pride and moved the family to his parents' house. There, they shared one cramped room. But Neymar Sr doesn't look back on those moments with bitterness. He remembers them as something far deeper. What we had in that house with no electricity was priceless. True love. And that is how you build a home. That is what he wrote in his joint biography with his son. But to make ends meet, Neymar Sr worked 3 jobs, as a mechanic, a transporter, and a salesman, whilst his wife Nadine held down a job at a childcare centre. But little baby Neymar, he was already chasing his destiny. He slept with a football. Not in a poetic, he dreamed of football kind of way. No, the ball was literally in his arms under the covers. His mother said that he had about 50 footballs in his room at one point. He used his sister and cousins as goalposts, dribbled around the furniture like it was a Champions League backline, and kicked holes in the walls of their tiny home. Yes, his mother's nerves were tested and vases broken, but she never stopped him. That environment built Neymar's foundation. It was the beginning of his obsession. By the time he turned 7, Neymar was already thinking faster, reacting sharper, and moving better than any kid his age. Not because he had the best coaches, but because the struggle taught him how to move with joy and how to make magic out of nothing. And soon, the world would notice. In the streets of São Vicente, where boys played barefoot on uneven concrete and used whatever they could find as goalposts, one man stopped to watch. His name was Betinho, a youth coach and recruiter for a small community club called Tumiaru. He saw Neymar gliding past kids older than him with ease, but he wasn't just watching the player and what he did with the ball, he was studying the source. He glanced at Neymar Sr., strong, compact, athletic, and then to Nadine, tall, slender, elegant. Thus, Betinho started doing the math. Not with numbers, but with genetics. It was the perfect combination. And so Betinho made his move. He recruited Neymar. Back then, Neymar Sr. was still juggling his 3 jobs and couldn't always watch Juninho, as his son was nicknamed, play, but the buzz was spreading like wildfire. Neighbours, parents, random guys on the street, all saying the same thing. Neymar was different. Brazil had seen wonder kids before, but he had something else. Betinho thought back to Robinho and told Neymar Sr. that his son would at the very least be as good as him. By age 10, he had earned a spot at Portuguesa Santista, a club with a stronger reputation and stiffer competition. Most kids dreamt of a move like this, but Neymar made it look inevitable, and even off the pitch, things began to change. Thanks to his performances, both Neymar and his sister were offered scholarships at one of the best private schools in Santos, a rare opportunity in a country where children often grow up with no education at all. In fact, according to a study from 2006, 14.4 million Brazilians aged 15 years and above couldn't read or write. And so Neymar Sr. wanted his son to have a backup plan, just in case the football dream didn't work out. Spoiler alert, it did, but the message stuck. Neymar's school coordinator described him as a model student, but football was still the focus. Even at break time when football wasn't allowed, Neymar always found a way. He'd beg the headmaster to lend him a ball just so that he could practice keepy-ups. And so by the time Neymar turned 13, the whispers of his talent had turned into widespread conversations. The skinny kid from São Vicente was no longer Brazil's best kept secret. Europe was listening, and one of the very first to act was one of Spain's top clubs. I'm of course talking about Real Madrid. That's right, Los Blancos bought Neymar and his father to Spain for a 3-week trial where Neymar passed every test. Jesus Gutierrez, the coach of Madrid's Infantil A team at the time, couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was better than all the others, he said, even though Neymar was 2 years younger than most of them. Bear in mind that the players Neymar was competing with here included the likes of Dani Carvajal, a future Real Madrid legend, yet the Brazilian boy with a mohawk was the standout. And so, Madrid's plan was simple: sign him early, raise him in Spain, and build the next Galactico in-house. Thus, they were ready to offer a contract similar to the one that Barcelona gave Messi as a child. Full accommodation, education, training, and a salary. According to Neymar Sr., the deal was extraordinarily lucrative for his age, and everything was lined up to go through, but then something strange happened. Neymar didn't want it. He was homesick, he missed Brazil. The sport he loved was no longer fun for him in Spain, and for his father, that was the deal breaker. He couldn't bear to see his son overcome with such sadness, regardless of the money involved. And so, they said no. It was a decision that may have changed football history. Back home in Brazil, Neymar returned to Santos, where it was finally his time to make a difference. At just 17 years old, he made his professional debut. He scored 10 goals in the league that season, then followed it up with 17 the next. But it wasn't just about the numbers, it was how he scored the goals. Solo dribbles, acrobatic volleys, all topped off with that signature Brazilian flair, like he was just playing a game in the streets. And so with the world watching, in 2010 Chelsea came knocking. They made a €20 million bid, an enormous fee for a teenager in Brazil at the time. Neymar's agent was sure that the deal was done, but Santos weren't ready to cash in. And so the club pulled out the big guns. They got Pelé, the king of Brazilian football, to personally call Neymar, asking him to stay. Thus, the club's president flew to New York himself and said no. Neymar was simply too valuable, not just to Santos, but now to Brazilian football itself. That being said, they weren't stupid. They knew that Neymar wouldn't stay forever. The real plan was to hold on to him until 2014, where Brazil would host the World Cup. They believed that if Neymar arrived at that tournament still playing in Brazil, his value would explode. And so Santos made a bold move. They cut Neymar into the deal. At just 17, he was given 40% of his own future transfer rights, a stake later bought by Delcia Sonda, a Brazilian supermarket mogul, for 1.8 million euros. Just like that, Neymar became a millionaire before he could even legally buy a beer. And well, from there, the brand of Neymar erupted. He was scoring outrageous goals what felt like every week, including the 2011 Puskas winner for one of the most beautiful goals I have ever seen. And to make it even more poetic, it was scored against Ronaldinho's Flamengo. From there, Neymar led Santos to the Copa Libertadores, South America's biggest club prize, for the first time since Pele's era. He had become the new face of Brazilian football. Every kid in the country wanted his haircut, every brand wanted his face, and every club wanted his signature. Which is when in 2011, Barca made their first major move. From the shadows, they offered 10 million euros directly to Neymar Sr, not to sign Neymar immediately, but to secure a promise that he would join Barcelona when the time was right, where he would then receive another 30 million. Then just 3 days later, Neymar's parents created a company specifically to receive the payment. The money was then disguised in Barcelona's financial books as a down payment for a future purchase. No name, no player ID, just a shadowy breadcrumb trail for anyone curious enough to follow it. Santos had no idea. Their golden boy was already half sold and the club that raised him wasn't even there to negotiate it. But at the same time, Real Madrid weren't giving up. They offered 45 million euros up front and even offered to cover Neymar's entire 40 million penalty clause to Barcelona. Chelsea hadn't thrown in the towel on this deal either. They told Neymar that he could be their Michael Jordan, but he wasn't interested. Robinho, one of his idols, had already whispered in his ear, "Go to Barcelona." At Madrid, it is every man for himself. And well, Neymar believed it. At Barcelona, he wasn't just being offered money, he was being offered a family. They were promising him a place alongside Lionel Messi. And so, in May 2013, the deal was sealed. For most fans, Neymar's transfer was a cause for celebration, but one man wasn't convinced. His name was Jordi Cassés, a pharmacist in his 40s and Barcelona club member who had a seat in the Camp Nou's third tier. While most supporters celebrated the signing, Jordi was flipping through the club's financial report, and that was when he spotted the mysterious 10 million euro down payment with no clear explanation. He asked the club for clarification, but they ignored him, and so he did something nobody expected. He filed a legal complaint. A Barcelona fan went to war with his own club. And so, just like that, the Spanish courts opened an investigation. What followed was one of the most explosive revelations in football transfer history. Barcelona were forced to reveal every detail of the Neymar deal. And suddenly, the official fee of 57.1 million looked like a joke, as here is what actually happened. 17.1 million euros was paid directly to Santos. 10 million paid in advance to Neymar's father in 2011. 30 million more was then transferred to his father's company. 2 million in bonuses were handed over if Neymar made the FIFA World 11, and then 500,000 more euros was paid to Neymar to act as Barcelona's brand ambassador in Brazil. Neymar Sr was paid 400,000 euros for a made-up scouting role, and then Neymar's salary itself came to over 10 million. And so altogether, the true cost of this deal was 86.2 million euros, and that was before the tax fraud case. Yep, that's right, when prosecutors looked deeper, they found inconsistencies in how the payments were declared. Some weren't taxed properly and others were hidden. Thus, Barcelona had to pay 14 million euros to Spanish tax authorities to settle the case. But by then, the damage was done. Club president Sandro Rosell, the man who had pushed hardest for Neymar, resigned, albeit he claims it was not due to the drama he had caused. Nonetheless, the Neymar transfer went from celebration to scandal. The club that famously called itself Mes que un Club was now at the centre of a courtroom saga that felt more like an episode of Narcos than it did football, all because of a kid from São Vicente who just wanted to kick a ball. But the question remained, was he worth it? Well, the answer lies in the chaos, controversy, and brilliance that followed. As despite all the drama attached to it, Neymar delivered big time. He stepped into the Camp Nou and became a superstar. Alongside Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, he formed the iconic MSN front three, a trio so lethal, so fluid, it's often regarded as the greatest attacking setup in the history of the sport. As in 2015, they ripped Europe to shreds. They scored 122 goals between them. Neymar alone bagged 39. He scored in both the Champions League semi-final against Bayern Munich and the final against Juventus, ultimately completing the treble. But then came March 8th, 2017, the night that changed everything. You see, Barcelona were 4-0 down after the first leg against Paris Saint-Germain. Fans, pundits, everyone had written Barca off. And then Neymar happened. He scored a free kick in the 88th minute, then a penalty in the 91st, and then delivered a fantastic assist for Sergi Roberto's 95th minute winner. Neymar was instrumental to it. By the end of his time in Spain, he had scored 105 goals in 186 games. He had won 2 La Ligas, 3 Copa del Reys, a Champions League, and had turned doubters into believers, bringing us to the final plot twist. As in 2017, Paris Saint-Germain activated Neymar's release clause, 222 million euros, the most expensive transfer in football history. And so in the end, it was worth all the risk. It was worth all the drama. Barcelona had won. Not only did they sign one of the most marketable players of his generation, they more than doubled the price they paid for him in return after building the most iconic front three in football. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and ding that notification bell. It seriously helps me out. Let me know in the comments what fascinating football stories you'd like to hear next, and whilst you wait, maybe click this video on your screen right now.